My husband thought he married a struggling waitress from the hood. For 3 years, I let him believe it. I scrubbed floors, clipped coupons, and wore thrift store clothes while billions sat in my bank account. But when his mother crossed the line, I decided it was time he learned the truth. If you've ever felt underestimated or had to hide who you really are, this story will hit different. Make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this remind us that we never truly know the people closest to us. Now, let me tell you how I kept the biggest secret of my life. Y'all, let me tell you something. Money changes everything, but not always in the way you think. My name is Destiny, and I've been living a lie for the past 3 years. Not the kind of lie where you cheat or steal, but the kind where you pretend to be poor when you're actually worth more money than most small countries. See, when I was 18, my grandmother passed away and left me something I never expected. Not just a house or some jewelry, but an entire tech empire. My grandmother, bless her soul, had quietly built one of the most successful software companies in the world. She'd started it back in the 70s, when nobody thought a black woman from Alabama could do anything with computers. But she proved them all wrong. And when she died, she left it all to me. Just like that, I went from a college freshman worried about student loans to someone with a net worth that had more zeros than I could count. Forbes wanted to interview me. Investment firms were calling me every day. But you know what I wanted? I wanted to be normal. I wanted to find someone who would love me for me, not for what was in my bank account. So I made a decision that seemed crazy to everyone around me. I hired people to run the company, set up a trust fund that would keep everything going. And I created a whole new identity for myself. Destiny the Billionaire became Destiny the Waitress. I got a job at a little diner called Mama's Kitchen, rented a tiny apartment in a working-class neighborhood, and started living paycheck to paycheck. Well, pretending to live paycheck to paycheck. The funny thing is, I was actually good at being poor. I learned how to stretch a dollar, how to find the best deals at thrift stores, how to make a meal out of nothing. It felt real in a way my privileged life never had. And that's where I met Anthony. Anthony walked into Mama's Kitchen on a rainy Tuesday morning, shaking water off his jacket and looking around like he'd never been in a place like that before. He was handsome in that clean-cut, corporate way, wearing a suit that cost more than most people made in a month. But when he smiled at me and asked what I recommended, there was something genuine about him. He became a regular, always ordering the same thing: coffee, black, and whatever pie we had fresh. He'd sit at the counter, and we'd talk during my breaks. He told me about his job in marketing, his dreams of starting his own agency someday, his complicated relationship with his family. I told him about my struggles as a waitress, how I was trying to save money to go back to school, how hard it was to make ends meet. Looking back, I should have felt guilty about lying to him. But the way he looked at me when I talked about working double shifts and counting pennies, it wasn't pity. It was respect. He saw strength in what he thought was my struggle, and that meant everything to me. Our first real date was at a food truck. Anthony insisted on paying, even though I could tell money was tight for him too. He was so proud to be able to treat me, to be the man taking care of his woman. When he held my hand that night and told me he admired how hard I worked, I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt seen, not for my money or my status, but for who I was choosing to be. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He saved up for months to buy me a ring. Nothing fancy, but it was everything to him. The proposal happened right there in Mama's Kitchen after closing time. He got down on one knee between the tables I'd been cleaning and told me he wanted to build a life with me, that he'd work as hard as he needed to so I wouldn't have to struggle anymore. I said yes, of course. How could I not? This man loved me when he thought I had nothing. This man wanted to protect and provide for me. This man saw me scrubbing floors and washing dishes and thought I was worth fighting for. Our wedding was small and simple. We couldn't afford anything fancy, or at least Anthony couldn't. I played my part perfectly, worrying about the cost of flowers and suggesting we skip the honeymoon to save money. Anthony's family was there, though I could tell his mother, Patricia, had some thoughts about her son marrying the help. Patricia was one of those women who measured everyone by their bank account and their zip code. She was polite to my face, but I caught the looks she gave Anthony, the way she'd purse her lips when I talked about work. After the wedding, she made it clear she thought her son had married beneath him. And that's where the real challenge began. Living this double life was easy when it was just me. But now I had a husband who wanted to take care of me, and a mother-in-law who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Every morning, I'd wake up and put on my uniform. I'd pack a lunch in a brown paper bag, kiss my husband goodbye, and head off to a job where I pretended to work for tips. What Anthony didn't know was that I actually owned the entire chain of Mama's Kitchen restaurants. I'd bought them the year before we met, but I kept that detail to myself. I became an expert at living poor. I shopped at discount stores, clipped coupons, and complained about the cost of groceries. I wore the same 5 outfits in rotation and got my hair done at beauty schools, where students practiced on real people. I kept our apartment small and modest, furnished with pieces from garage sales and clearance racks. The hardest part wasn't the acting, though. It was watching Anthony stress about money. He'd lie awake at night worrying about our bills, working overtime to make sure we had enough for rent. He'd skip lunch to save money, wear shoes with holes in them, rather than buy new ones. All while, I had enough money in various accounts to solve every problem he was worrying about. But I told myself it was worth it. Anthony loved me, really loved me. He'd come home from work, exhausted, and still want to hear about my day. He'd massage my feet when I complained about them hurting from standing all day. He'd surprise me with little gifts he couldn't afford because he wanted to see me smile. The problems really started when Patricia began her campaign to convince Anthony he'd made a mistake. It started small, little comments about how I dressed, questions about my family that were really attempts to highlight how different our backgrounds were. She'd mention other women Anthony could have married, successful women with degrees and careers. "I just worry about your future," she'd tell Anthony when she thought I couldn't hear. "Marriage is hard enough without struggling financially. And starting a family, how will you afford children?" Anthony would defend me, but I could see it wearing on him. The constant suggestions that he could do better, that he was limiting himself by being with me. Patricia was planting seeds, and I watched them grow into doubt in my husband's eyes. The dinner invitations became tests. Patricia would invite us over and then spend the evening talking about investments, vacation homes, private schools, all things she knew we supposedly couldn't afford. She'd watch my face, looking for signs that I felt out of place or inferior, and I played right into it. I'd look uncomfortable when they talked about money, change the subject when conversation turned to expensive things. I'd compliment Patricia's jewelry and her home like someone who could never dream of having such nice things. I was so committed to my role that I sometimes forgot it was just a performance. Things got worse when Anthony lost his job. The marketing firm he worked for downsized, and suddenly we went from struggling to what he thought was crisis mode. I watched my strong, proud husband become someone I barely recognized. He was angry all the time, frustrated that he couldn't provide the way he wanted to. Patricia saw her opportunity and took it. She started coming around more often, bringing groceries and paying for little things while making sure Anthony felt every bit of the charity. She'd slip him money when she thought I wasn't looking. Money he was too proud to take, but too desperate to refuse. "This is what happens when you don't think about the future," she'd say, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. "Some people are just meant to struggle, Anthony, but you don't have to be one of them." The worst part was watching Anthony start to believe her. He'd look at me sometimes, like he was seeing me for the first time, really taking in my cheap clothes and our shabby apartment. I could see him wondering if his mother was right, if he'd settled for less than he deserved. I started thinking about telling him the truth. How do you explain to someone that you've been lying about everything for 3 years? How do you say, "Surprise, honey, I'm actually worth $3 billion, And I've been watching you stress about rent money because I wanted to test your love. But before I could figure out how to handle that conversation, Patricia made sure I wouldn't get the chance. She organized a family dinner, ostensibly to cheer Anthony up about his job situation. But what she really wanted was to stage an intervention. I'll never forget that night. Patricia had invited Anthony's siblings and their spouses, creating an audience for what she was about to do. The conversation started innocently enough, small talk about work and weather. But I could feel the tension building, like storm clouds gathering. Patricia waited until dessert to make her move. She looked around the table at her successful children and their accomplished partners, then let her eyes settle on me. "You know, Anthony," she said, her voice sweet as poison, "I've been thinking about your situation. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, a chance to really evaluate what you want from life." Anthony looked confused. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean, maybe it's time to be honest about whether you're living the life you're meant to live." She gestured around the table. "Look at your brother Robert. He married Linda, and now they have the house, the careers, the future. Your sister Carol found someone who matches her ambition." I felt every eye at that table turn to me. Patricia wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. "I'm not saying love isn't important," she continued, "but love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't buy houses or put children through college. Sometimes we have to make hard choices about what's really best for everyone involved." Anthony's face went red. "Mom, stop." But Patricia was just getting started. "All I'm saying is that some people are built for different lives. Some people are meant to work in diners and live in small apartments. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Anthony, you were meant for more. You have potential that's being wasted." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Anthony, waiting for him to defend me, to shut his mother down completely. But he just sat there, staring at his plate. That's when Patricia delivered the final blow. "Destiny seems like a sweet girl," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. "But sweetness doesn't change reality. You're limiting yourself, son. You're choosing to struggle when you don't have to." I waited for Anthony to say something, anything, to tell his mother she was out of line, that he loved me, that money wasn't everything. But the seconds ticked by and he stayed silent. That's when I realized I was done. Done pretending to be someone I wasn't. Done watching this woman disrespect me while my own husband sat there and let it happen. Done living a lie that was supposed to protect my heart but was actually breaking it. I stood up from that table, looked Patricia straight in the eye, and smiled. "You know what, Patricia?" I said, my voice calm and clear. "You're absolutely right. Some people are meant for different lives." And then I walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove home to make some phone calls. The next evening, I asked Anthony to invite his family for dinner at his mother's house. I told him I had something important to say to everyone, something that might change things between us. He looked worried, probably thinking I was going to break up with him or ask for some kind of support to get through his job loss. I spent the afternoon getting ready, but not the way I had for the past 3 years. I called my personal stylist, had my hair done at the salon I actually went to, and put on an outfit that cost more than most people's cars. I had my driver pick me up in the Bentley, the one that had been sitting in storage since I'd started this whole charade. When we pulled up to Patricia's house, I could see faces in the windows. The entire family was there, just like I'd requested. Anthony was standing on the porch, looking confused. He'd never seen the car before, never seen me dressed like this. I stepped out of that Bentley like I was walking a red carpet. My driver opened the door for me, and I glided up that walkway in designer heels that clicked with authority on the concrete. Anthony's mouth fell open. "Destiny, what? Whose car is that? Why are you dressed like—" I didn't answer him. I walked right past him, right into that house where Patricia and her whole family were gathered in the living room, staring at me like I was a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said, settling into the same chair where Patricia had humiliated me the night before. "I think it's time we had a real conversation." Patricia's face had gone pale. I don't understand. Who drove you here? Whose clothes are those? I reached into my purse, a Hermes bag that cost more than Patricia's car, and pulled out my phone. Without saying a word, I pulled up my banking app and set it on the coffee table, where everyone could see the screen. The number had so many digits that it took them a moment to process what they were looking at. $3.7 billion, I said quietly. That's what I'm worth. That's what I've been worth this entire time. The silence in that room was absolute. Anthony was standing in the doorway, looking like he'd been struck by lightning. Patricia's mouth was opening and closing, like a fish. You see, Patricia, I continued, you were right about one thing. Some people are meant for different lives, but you got it backwards about who was meant for what. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood Patricia was so proud of. I own 12 houses, I said, conversationally. The smallest one has 8 bedrooms. I own the restaurant chain, where I've been pretending to work. I own 3 private jets, a yacht, and more cars than I can remember. I employ over 10,000 people, and my company's innovations have changed how the world communicates. I turned back to face them, and I could see Anthony shaking his head in disbelief. The apartment we live in, I bought the entire building. I've been paying our rent to myself for 3 years. The struggles you've been watching Anthony go through, I could have solved them with pocket change. But I wanted to see who would love me when they thought I had nothing. Patricia finally found her voice. This is impossible. You're a waitress. You don't have money for what, Patricia? For nice clothes? For education? For dignity? I smiled at her, and it wasn't a kind smile. I have 3 degrees, including an MBA from Harvard. I've been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine twice. The president has my personal phone number. Anthony finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Why? Why would you lie about all of this? I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved enough to lie to for 3 years, and I felt my heart breaking, because I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am. Not what I have, I said. I wanted to know that when times got hard, my partner would see me as someone worth fighting for, not someone worth discarding. The weight of what I was saying settled over the room like a heavy blanket. For 3 years, Anthony, I watched you work overtime to take care of what you thought was your struggling wife. I watched you skip meals to make sure we had enough food. I watched you wear shoes with holes in them because you thought new ones were a luxury we couldn't afford. And you know what that meant to me? Everything. I could see tears in his eyes now. But last night, when your mother suggested I was holding you back, when she implied I wasn't good enough for you, you said nothing. You sat there and let her talk about me, like I was some kind of burden you'd accidentally picked up. Patricia tried to interrupt. Now wait just a minute. I didn't know. You didn't know what? I turned on her, with all the fury I'd been holding back for 3 years. You didn't know that maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't judge people based on their bank accounts. You didn't know that treating someone like they're beneath you says more about your character than theirs. I walked over to where she was sitting, and she actually shrank back in her chair. Every snide comment about my clothes, every suggestion that Anthony could do better, every time you made me feel small because you thought I was poor. That wasn't about money, Patricia. That was about who you are as a person. I straightened up and looked around the room at Anthony's family, all of them staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. The truth is, I never needed Anthony's money. I never needed his family's approval. What I needed was to know that I'd found someone who would stand by me when things got tough. Someone who would defend me when others attacked me. Someone who would choose me even when it wasn't easy. I picked up my phone from the coffee table and looked at Anthony one more time. I've learned what I needed to know, I said. The question now is whether you can live with what you've learned about yourself. And with that, I walked out of that house and back to my real life. The aftermath has been complicated, as you might imagine. Anthony has been calling and texting nonstop, trying to understand how his world got turned upside down in one evening. He's hurt that I lied to him. But he's also devastated that he failed the test he didn't know he was taking. Patricia, meanwhile, has done a complete 180. She's been leaving voicemails apologizing, talking about how she always knew there was something special about me, trying to rewrite history now that she knows who I really am. But here's the thing about respect. Once it's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. Patricia spent 3 years showing me exactly who she was when she thought she had power over me. Anthony spent 3 years showing me he would protect and provide for me. But when it came to protecting my dignity, he fell short. I don't regret the deception, if I'm being honest. Those 3 years taught me more about love, loyalty, and human nature than all my money and success ever could. I learned that there are people who will love you when you have nothing, and there are people who will only value you when you have everything. I learned that sometimes the greatest luxury isn't what money can buy. It's being seen and valued for who you are, not what you possess. Most importantly, I learned that true love isn't about finding someone who needs you or someone you need to save. It's about finding someone who chooses you, defends you, and stands with you no matter what the world throws at you. As for Anthony and me, we're in counseling, trying to figure out if a marriage built on such a fundamental deception can survive the truth. Some days, I think we might make it. Other days, I wonder if the damage is too deep to repair. But I'll tell you this, I'll never again hide who I am for anyone. I'll never again make myself small so someone else can feel big. And I'll never again settle for someone who won't fight for me when it matters most. Because at the end of the day, love isn't about the money in your bank account. It's about the courage in your heart and the strength of your character. And those are things that no amount of money can buy. What would you have done in Destiny's situation? Would you have revealed your wealth sooner or kept the secret even longer? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story opened your eyes about making assumptions about people, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that'll make you think twice about judging others. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.